And you wake before dawn 20,000 years ago to a cold that bites through animal hide. The fire is almost out, and there, just past the edge of the light, two eyes are watching you. A wolf, lean, hungry, close enough to kill you, but it doesn't move. It just sits at the boundary between the dark and the warmth, waiting. You should be terrified. Instead, you toss it a scrap of bone. Neither of you knows it yet, but you have just begun the most successful partnership in the history of life on Earth. For 99% of human history, there were no dogs. There was only the wolf, a rival predator competing with us for the same prey on the same frozen ground. We were not friends. We were two apex hunters circling the same kill. And yet, today, there are around 900 million dogs on the planet, curled on couches, riding in cars, sleeping at the foot of your bed, somewhere between that wary wolf at the firelight and the animal snoring beside you. Something extraordinary happened. So here's the question. How did a wild killer become man's best friend, and did we tame them, or did they tame us? Let's start with what we know for certain. In a cave in Germany, archaeologists uncovered a grave dated to about 14,000 years ago. Inside lay two humans and a dog. So this is the Bonn-Oberkassel dog, and it changed everything because the bones told a story. This animal had been desperately sick as a puppy, struck by a virus that should have killed it. It survived, which means someone fed it, someone kept it warm, and someone cared for a useless dying animal that could do nothing for them. 14,000 years ago, a human loved a dog enough to nurse it through the worst and then to bury it beside their own dead. But the genetics pushed the story back even further. By sequencing ancient DNA, researchers found that dogs and wolves split from a common ancestor somewhere between 20,000 and 40,000 years ago, long before that grave, long before farming, long before cities. The deal was already being struck in the dark. Now, some of you are thinking, okay, but how does a wolf actually become a dog? Wolves are wild. You can't just decide to make one friendly. Fair question, and the answer comes from a Soviet scientist and a field full of foxes. Hence, in 1959, a geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev began an experiment in Siberia that should not have worked. He took silver foxes, wild snapping, terrified of humans, and he selected for one single trait, not size, not color, just one thing, tameness. The calmest fox in each generation got to breed. That was the only rule. What happened next stunned the scientific world. Within just a handful of generations, the foxes changed, and not only in temperament, they started wagging their tails, they licked the hands of researchers, they whined when people left. But here's the part nobody predicted: their bodies changed too. Floppy ears, curly tails, patches of white fur, shorter snouts. Hence, the foxes were starting to look like dogs, even though no one had ever selected for how they looked. Belyaev had selected only for friendliness, and friendliness dragged a whole suitcase of physical traits along with it. Think about what that means. The floppy ears on your dog, the patch of white on its chest, those aren't traits we chose. They are the side effects of becoming gentle, the visible signature of a wild thing learning to trust. So picture how it really happened back at that firelight. The wolves that survived around humans weren't the strongest or the fiercest. They were the calmest. The ones brave enough to come close, but tame enough not to attack. Generation after generation, the boldest but gentlest wolves got the scraps, got the warmth, got to live. Hence, we weren't breeding them on purpose. We were breeding them by accident, simply by tolerating the friendly ones and driving off the rest. And the partnership paid off fast. A wolf's nose is thousands of times sharper than ours. Its ears catch sounds we'll never hear. Suddenly, our ancestors could track prey they'd have lost and sleep through the night with a living alarm system at the edge of camp. In return, the wolves got food they didn't have to chase and a fire they didn't have to build. Two species hunting as one. Different brains, same goal. It's one of the only times in nature that two predators stopped competing and started cooperating. But the deepest part of this story isn't about hunting at all. It's about love, and we can measure it. And in 2015, a Japanese researcher named Miho Nagasawa published a study in the journal Science. She measured a hormone called oxytocin, the same chemical that floods a mother's brain when she holds her newborn, the bonding hormone. Here's what she found. When a dog and its owner simply gaze into each other's eyes, oxytocin rises in both of them. The human feels closer to the dog feels closer to the human. So they look at each other longer, which raises the hormone again, which makes them look longer still, a loop, a feedback loop of affection running between two completely different species. And the kicker, when the researchers ran the same test with hand-raised wolves, the loop didn't happen. Wolves don't hold our gaze that way. And this bond, this exact chemical circuit of love, is something dogs evolved specifically for us. It is the same hormonal machinery that bonds a parent to a child, repurposed across the species line, which means you, today, scratching your dog behind its floppy ears, are the living end of a 20,000-year experiment. That animal at your feet carries the calmness of a wolf, brave enough to approach a fire, the body shaped by gentleness, the brain wired to read your face, and a hormone loop firing right now that says you are family, nobody designed this. No one sat down and invented the dog. It emerged slowly from countless small moments of trust. A scrap tossed into the dark, a sick puppy nursed back to life, a long look held by the fire.
You think you have a pet?
What you really have is a treaty, signed in firelight 20,000 years ago by a wolf who chose to stay